after 7 years of bleeding, reducing, getting out of geographies, getting out of portfolios, getting out of industries, firing people, shutting branches, we can again do something meaningful. We can again grow. We can, do big stuff. Life consists of heavy defeats. And this you have to understand, embrace, wake up, stand up and fight more.
Welcome to Banking on Success, the podcast in which experts and leaders share their compelling business and leadership stories from CE and beyond. I'm Milica Kavrakova, Group Head Institutional Clients of RBI, and I have today with me again my sparring partner,
Daniel Rath, Head of Corporate Customers.
And we are very happy to welcome on board Blaž Brodnjak, CEO of NLB, the leading bank in Slovenia and the mother company of a leading banking and financial group in Southeast Europe. Welcome on board.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for finding the time today to join us. For our audience, I would like to guide shortly through the distinguished career, which is spanning over more than 20 years in international banking industry of Blaž. You started as an account officer and made it to the top. You've been working in banks like Bank Austria, Raiffeisen, BAWAG PSK. You were also
Padre International Restructuring.
Yeah, you've been also Chief Investment Officer of Triglav Group. And then 2012, you joined NLB and made it to the top. 3 years ago, you've been awarded as well as Manager of the Year by the Managers Association of Slovenia. So only this snapshot of your amazing journey raises already the first question on my side. What attracted you initially to join the financial industry, and what moments particularly shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm specifically honored and privileged because I was working for Raiffeisen Group, so I'm glad that you're doing this. I call this a good practice, talking to people from the region and from the business. It was kind of a coincidence to end up in banking, but Slovenia was getting independent in 1991. I was finishing my studies a couple of years later, and everyone was talking about now we become free economy, and will have market economy, and we will have capital market, and it became a very appealing idea. I really was the stock exchange has been introduced as an organized market in Slovenia. And it became really something that young people were bubbling around in the schools everywhere. I want to be a stockbroker. So I actually really wanted to become a stockbroker, and I did become a stockbroker. So my apprenticeship was actually at that time largest privately held stock brokerage institution. But then I realized that after 6 months of working in it, that selling expectations is a tough job. Because it's very difficult, to confront the situations when you are not actually delivering at the client was expecting you to be delivering at, right? Because of course markets are volatile, valuations are very volatile, and you are selling anticipations and expectations. And this was one point of view, but on the other hand, I was actually commuting daily pretty far because I was born and raised in Ptuj, which is the oldest Slovenian town, northeast, close to Graz.
A beautiful one, by the way.
Close to Austrian border.
For those who have never visited Slovenia,
you should.
One of the places to be.
Yes, absolutely. But I was commuting on a daily basis to Ljubljana. And then my wife got pregnant, and it was pretty high stretch because I was leaving Ptuj at 5:45 in the morning, and I was coming back at 9-10 o'clock in the evening, and it was on a daily basis becoming a real stretch. And then I saw Bank Austria actually publishing a job ad for the client manager for corporates for northeastern Slovenia, sitting in Maribor, which is actually of course half an hour commute, which is something totally convenient. I didn't know what to expect. I applied. And by coincidence, basically, me wanting to move instead of commuting to Ljubljana to commuting to Maribor, ended up in banking. I'm a sales guy by nature. You can see that I'm a pretty extrovert, right? And I was able to persuade these guys that maybe I'm the right choice, to open up the market because Bielsa at that point in time was pretty weak in this northeastern part of the country. And then I started, top-down marketing plans. I was driving my Toyota Yaris at that point of time, from client to client, building my portfolio. And after a year, I had quite a good success with my portfolio. And then I was offered immediately after a year, basically, to head a mid-market department, SME department, it's a mid-sized companies department in Ljubljana. Again, Ljubljana. Then there was a privatization process actually pending of Nova Kreditna Banka Maribor, which was the second largest bank at that time in the country. And Bank Austria Kreditna Stadt was actually pretendent in this show, right? At that point in time, Unicredit and BACA had the best chances. Hypovereinsbank was already owning BACA, but BACA was actually labeled as the buyer, not Hypovereinsbank Group, right? Which was maybe a strategic mistake at that point of time because it gave an excuse to local politicians, no, these Austrian guys are not buying us. If it was German at that point in time, maybe it would even fly.
Maybe it could have been
Maybe it could even fly. And this little
It was 2006? When was it?
2000, yeah, no, it was
No,
2001, 2,
Yeah.
that period,
really?
yeah. Yeah, I was in BACA since 1st of January 2000 up to end of February 2002 when I joined Raiffeisen Group, right? And then I was again commuting. I was in Ljubljana. Of course, this privatization didn't go through. It failed, right? Because you couldn't sell to Austrians nor Italians, right? So they stopped it, they pulled it back. And then I was again commuting, and then my wife got pregnant for the second time. Again, I was in a stretch. And then guess what? Raiffeisen was coming to Slovenia.
And this was Maribor.
Yeah, it was Maribor. It was
Easy.
buying small bank, Krekov Bank at that point of time. Unfortunately, I didn't understand that this was not yet then really full-fledged ambition. Then under Mr. Stepic, still Raiffeisen was really growing like hell. I mean, throughout the entire region, organically.
Now I'm curious to hear your view on, because you mentioned your view on the privatization process and Hypovereins, etc.
Yeah.
How about that one, if you wish to share?
It was a very interesting experience. I mean, Mr. Stepic was an extremely charismatic person. He was then chairing the supervisory board. But then I actually sent, from this point on, I was no longer selling applications. From this point on, I was already selling offers. So I was trying to identify the project that is of interest to me. And then I actually tried to analyze the project, really addressed it in a way that I was sending an offer for cooperation to the board. I believe your company at this point of time has this challenge, and I believe I'm qualified enough to address this challenge appropriately, right? And I sent this actually to Raiffeisen at that point of time, local management team that came in, right? There was an Austrian CMO at that point in time, corporate board member appointed. And then, of course, because we had the CA background, so I actually learned my banking in CA Academy in Schottengasse. So I'm Viennese born in terms of banking.
A lot of people did that.
Right? Yeah. So really, corporate banking, this was a hub. CA was a hub for corporate banking, right, in Vienna. So I learned my cash flow-based lending principles then there, right? And then actually, I was immediately more or less recognized as someone that potentially is the right selection because I had this training, hardcore training, knew the region, knew the country already. And then I took over corporate banking. Then I was actually fished already after 2 years. Then Bauer Pesca came in as a greenfield project, and I was headhunted already then. So since then, it was headhunting more or less. But it was a very interesting introduction into banking because it was never, on my horizon at all. I wanted to be a broker and then whatever, private equity, business, sexy stuff, right? Not traditional banking. But
So you just grabbed the opportunities, and someone may say it were coincidences, but it permanently, the opportunities came and you accepted
it evolves
them.
in front of your eyes, right? And once you get visibility, Slovenia is a small country. It was a really specific situation because we introduced market economy, and of course, the old box couldn't do it, right? So you have to have new generation coming in that was willing to work 16 hours a day at that point of time. I mean, I remember our teams, right, in international banking subsidiaries, we were kids. We were all just finishing university, eager to work. The entire corporate banking unit was one senior from Austria. The rest were kids learning on job, because there was no common practice of this business at all. Corporate banking didn't exist. It was, Communist Party deciding what you fund, and you fund it, right? There's no normal business. Free entrepreneurial initiative was limited to 5 employees. You could only have your handcraft shop, and that was it. Privately, you couldn't hold the business even. You couldn't own the business privately, right? So it was really completely new evolution of economy as a whole. And these then required normal corporate banking principles where you try to understand the underlying business cash flows, right? To project these cash flows, do the bank case, the stress case, and then you really start talking about supporting the growth of what is to become a normal economy with Mittelstand as a backbone, with normal structure of the economy and so on, right? So it was really, really very intriguing for all of us youngsters. And my generation, right, of kids of that time ended up practically almost without exception from this BACA team in management boards of banks. 6, 7 kids from the same generation, we all ended up in management boards of the banks in the country. Because as I said, there was no competition, right? There were no gray hairs, running this for 25 years. It doesn't exist. It didn't exist. So there was a step change, which offered incredible opportunity to young generation because we suddenly were, in front line. Suddenly we are doing crazy stuff, tough deals, big deals, syndication deals, It was us working on that and learning on the go, right? We had to reinvent it basically with assistance, obviously, from Viennese hubs of international businesses. It was predominantly Viennese hubs at that point of time. So it was really an extraordinary period, right? And then you can really quickly progress because you're visible. You work on concrete deals. You make it success. Businesses see you. You're quickly, somehow recognized. And then, as said, right, I was headhunted to run a bank as a management board member with less than 30. Right? When I joined Raiffeisen, I was 26. And I had to pull off the restructuring. I had to, come to settlement agreements with employees because we got rid of half of them. Because, of course, this was pseudo-caritative charity institution instead of real commercial bank, right? So I was really working in restructuring mode with 26. Then I was headhunted into a startup project. Startup is a crisis management. Startup is totally crisis management, right? So from crisis management to crisis management, right? Then, of course, Cerberus came in because of the trouble of generally. So they decided to, of course, wind down and divest whatever is out of Austria. I said, I will not liquidate what I was building because I was personally recruiting everyone, right? These 25 people that were there as a small corporate hub. So then I said, I leave. I used the time for the MBA and then I was appointed for the insurance company management board. And this was the experience. This was the thing that really profiled me because I came in as to be independently minded asset manager, right? Because, insurance business, they have their own placements, assets. It's more or less banking logic. You have a bond book, more or less. You have, very scarcely something else, but it applies the same creditworthiness assessment logic and valuation logic as banking. Very comparable if you're responsible for investment part of the insurance book, right? And then I realized that this is a first majority state-owned company, and their maybe principles are a bit different. You're not necessarily eagerly awaited as the independently minded person, right? And I got couriers coming to my office. Maybe Triglav Insurance should buy that. I said, no. Why should it? Right? I'm following the Companies Act, which says you perform your business in the interest and on behalf of the company, not someone else's partial interest, right? Of this very specific company you run. And there were such incidents here and there. And then, of course, I didn't get the license of the Insurance Supervision Agency. I was, not recognized as fit and proper for, a management board role in the systemic insurance company, largest in the country and the largest in Balkans. What do you do? That was a stress, right? That was a real stress situation. And this was 2009. I was 35. And I was told by the regulator in a sovereign country in European Union not to be appropriate to be a management board member of the regulated business. What do you do? Any future application contains, of course, in this table, this remark. Was there any regulatory body that took away or did not, of course, grant you a license? And of course, you have to tick the box, yes, and then explain, right? And then what do you say? Right? So it was really challenging. At that point of time, I decided, wow, this is the largest insurance company in the country. This is finance industry, regulated industry. Me being a career finance guy in regulated business, what do? I was appointed as a management board member of the largest insurance company, and I was not vetted. What do I do now? Can I count on being vetted for future board positions in banks? Although I was vetted before in the banks, but after this experience, will I be? Right? This was real stress. And then I said, obviously I need to leave the country for a while because, what do I do now? You're appointed as a board member of the largest, right, insurance business or finance business. And then what do I do next? I can't be, a branch manager in the bank or something. If you start to manage your career. So at that point of time, I started looking around. I took a month off and started looking around. And then I realized that Adria has got a new management board. It was just, exactly mid of 2010 when Mr. Kranabiter and his team then came in. And then I did the same. I sent an offer. I see you have a problem, right? I've got some corporate banking skills. I might be the right, part of your team to address this problem. I was within a month or two, we, came to an agreement. And in a couple of months, I was then running the corporate and public finance sector as B1. So not a board position, but B1 in Klagenfurt, right? Sitting in Klagenfurt for 2 years. And that was the experience. This was the experience. 55% or whatever NPL ratios, and, these exposures, a lot of real estate speculation. I remember my first credit committee, when we had on the table, I think it was 54 cases, and we just first wave of reviews, of portfolio reviews, right? 54 cases, all real estate speculation, all more than 50 million exposure. It began at 3 p.m. It ended at 3 a.m. next morning.
That's a credit committee.
Yeah.
This was my first working day. 3rd of December 2010. I will never forget that because we created 830 million provisions in this my first session. I said, I just joined the show and I just made 830 million loss. Where did I enter now? And such things then really profile you. Yeah, this is the hard stuff, right? First, you are not accepted as a profile locally. Then you come to totally, of course, foreign environment. At that point in time, of course, I was learning German in gymnasium and so on, but I was not fluent, right? And of course,
This was the time to learn
people in
German.
Carinthia are pretty specific, you know that, right? When it comes to Slovenian-Austrian relationship. So I had to, of course, learn German. I apologize not speaking English because for 13 years I'm not that actively addressing anyone in German, but I can still understand everything, of course. But this was really first foreign environment, foreign language, that you are barely catching up because, of course, we can have a view whether, Carinthian Austrian is, Hochdeutsch, right? Because I had my Hochdeutsch lessons taken, but this was something else I was listening to.
Different in Frankfurt and in Graz.
The same as in Slovenia, people from southwest don't understand someone from northeast. It's like Vorarlberg and, Steiermark. I mean, it's a different ballgame, right? So it was really new environment, shocking structure of portfolio, and language and everything else. But I took it as a challenge. And then for 2 years I was bleeding here, and I said I will stay in Austria. I said I was somehow envisaging, be it within Hypo or other banking groups, because I had previous experience also from other banking groups. I might want to go to Vienna. Obviously, the quality of life in Vienna is among the best in the world, right? So I could easily envisage my family living in Vienna. I mean, if anywhere else than where I live now, it could easily be Vienna, right? And I was already starting working on this. And I said, I will return to Slovenia only if the project is big enough and the team fits. Big enough meaning I can actively reshape the environment into professionalization terms. Exactly learning the hard way how it works, right? With these partial interest mechanisms embedded. And still majority of big businesses, first listing in Ljubljana Stock Exchange, have material investment of the Republic of Slovenia. NLB is the only business that really is fully independent in mind, with international governing bodies, to the significant extent attributed to the European Central Bank kicking in with their direct supervisory mechanism, right? Otherwise, God knows, right? And that's a privilege. I have in my management board people, two Germans, one Austrian, right? One Macedonian, 3 Slovenians, and in supervisory board, guys that are former JP Morgan, Barclays, Citi, ING, right? Directors. So that's a real privilege. We are the only arm's length run business in the region with such systemic importance in the entire region, right? And in this respect, that's of course a privilege. And then I saw, okay, NLB is in a much worse shape than it used to be. It requires fundamental restructuring. I just had my 2 years of Hard Rock Cafe at Hypo. All right, let's grab a beer and work. Making jokes, but it was, of course, for me, I had the toolbox because we just did in Hypo what was necessary to be done. Of course, it took them many more years because the magnitude of the problem was very, very big, right? Today's Addiko is 1/6 of what it used to be, right? It was 34 billion business. Now it's 6 billion business. So it was something totally different. And we had to run down everything and brush the so-called brush portfolios. But I had the skill set. I had the toolbox. I had, the energy, and I exactly knew what is awaiting me. And then I was called by the that time chairman. That was a kid that we started working with together in Bankhaus Rietnerstadt. That was the chairman of the supervisory board, and then became, was supposed to take over as a CEO. But he said, I'm not doing this alone. Are you doing this with me? And so it started. And now it's 12 years, 12 years and a half. And in the meantime, we actually brought this business to the level where it is, because it was at that point of time, of course, it needed rescue, it needed bailout, it needed really significant recap by the Republic of Slovenia that chipped in 2.23 billion euro. But of course, there were commitments then to the European Commission that we had to fulfill and deliver. The most important one being the privatization. So the crown process and jewel process, more or less, was privatization execution. And we were on the roadshow 3 times. Twice supposedly to be deal roadshow, and the state pulled back.
I remember the times.
Yeah, and then we had to add additional commitments. We had to forego, for example, life insurance business that we've been partnering in with the KBC, for example, right? joint venture, highly successful business. We built this business from 0 to 20% market share as a bank. Well, insurance business, right? Life insurance business. But this was really decisive one because we had a straitjacket of the state aid since 2012 when I joined up to more or less 2018, 14th of November. I remember, I'll never forget. 65% listed in Iran and London, right, through the GDR program. Then June 2019, where the residual 10% were done. And these then unleashed all potentials. And then we suddenly appeared as someone that is, potent, that suddenly can do something. And the first thing we did in 6 months was buying the bank with the largest network in Serbia, for example, where we were really the underdog with 2% market share. We suddenly were able to do this. And then you need somehow a stroke of luck a bit, right? If we had some luck to be able to pull this one off. But we did it basically within 6 months after getting released, right? And get another, luck moment. We signed the contract 6 days before official declaration of pandemic. Imagine. Would we dare to sign the SPA if pandemic was declared 7 days earlier? Would we
As mentioned before, you always need this notch of luck in every deal you do.
Would you dare? You would not even think of signing such a deal if the world is collapsing. So sometimes you need luck, right? And then we were also, then this actually was the really decisive moment that triggered in everyone's head working for NLB. Wow, we can do big things. After 7 years of bleeding, reducing, getting out of geographies, getting out of portfolios, getting out of industries, firing people, shutting branches, we can again do something meaningful. We can again grow. We can, do big stuff. And this really, transformed the minds of key colleagues. And then on, actually, we applied, growth attitude. Then we started looking around. Of course, there are capital considerations. Of course, there are liquidity considerations, everything else. But, then you see that you can do big stuff. And this is automatic trigger. You enter this mode simply. And that's different operating model from hard restructuring to transition, right, to growth. That's 3 totally different management styles, leadership styles, operating models. Now we actually on daily basis analyze actively all eventual M&A opportunities in banking, leasing, insurance, life insurance in the region. Ancillary space, mobility platform. We just bought the web portal, for example. We bought the asset management company in Macedonia. We bought, obviously, the largest leasing in Slovenia with offspring in Croatia, which is coming back to Croatia after 33 years for the first time, right? And so on.
Before we jump into NLB and the strategy, I think that is already quite.
This is something I'm curious about.
You're curious about. One more on your development. You said that the craftsmanship or what you learned was Vienna, basically the base Kreditanstalt and the like. And still now, as a CEO as well, you have leadership capacity. What shaped you most in those years? Western owners, also state-owned, you said. Was there a person, was there something where I said, okay, that's the leadership I want to have now in this growth that NLB is doing?
I mean, there was, for every why, there was, every because. No? So I was actually, in the first 10 years of my career, having very, very intensive experience, landscape. And meeting a lot of leaders and managers, and all of them had their role in this or other way. They all somehow helped me calibrate the way how I should behave. I remember that time CEO of Raiffeisen gave me a message. You do this next time, I'll just open the window. Because I publicly went against him. Such things you remember. I will do nothing else. When you jump in here so quickly, I will just open the window. Wisdom, right? Think twice, sleep over, right? Don't jump to conclusions. But then there were, of course, very decisive ones, such as the likes that you were obviously bullied. I entered the premises of a supervision agency. I had a slot at 1 until 2. No one looked at me. So the message was surrendered before we even started having a hearing. Right? So this is profiling you, hardship profiles you. You start reading between the lines. You start understanding from situations. You start really listening very carefully, trying to figure out, which are really material details and which are immaterial details. But in terms of a style, you learn on the go that you are the one that, if you want to be really the leader, that is removing the hurdles. You realize sooner or later that they come to you when there is real shit. Right? They don't come, to celebrate jointly easily. The higher you go, right, the more you're alone, and the wind is stronger. You are there, only in case of real trouble, because then they come and then you have to resolve because you are the best paid. This is your decision, right? And you learn on the go that you are the actually hurdle remover, right? And the sooner you realize that, the better for you, right? And then you listen, and you should here I have to remove one hurdle. Here I have to. How do I enable you? How do I make sure that you can fly? And if you are applying this mode, it's easier for you to progress quicker. So you learn actually from people that you see are hurdle removers, because they really help people strive. They really help people excel, and they don't take credit automatically for it. It's easier said than done, but you learn from difficult situations. This one, when I learned, I didn't get a license, right? This is a self-reflection moment. Is it me? Did I really do something wrong? Professionally, personally, you start reflecting. You have to be reflecting on the go. Every new, milestone is reflection point. And I said, I was working for, it's not few, right? 5. This is my 5th banking group, insurance group, brokerage house, right? So it was happening very intensively. In first 10 years of my career, I changed 7 or 6, 8 employers and 14 positions. Imagine this is a continuous stress. That's a continuous stress. You are for 6 months in incoming and for 6 months in outgoing.
Which creates resilience.
Which creates resilience. And that's why I'm wearing the heart of Sarajevo. That's a very specific message. It's a symbol of resilience. What this city withstood, right? You have to build resilience. If you want to be a long-term successful manager, you have to be extremely resilient, because you have to learn that you are there for hard stuff, not for weak stuff. You are there when it matters and when it's tough. When someone has to take responsibility in a liability context that average person doesn't even understand. What does an average Joe from the street understand? What is the ECB regulatory and liability context in AML terms? They have zero clue. They have not read the Banking Act of Slovenia that can penalize me, Bank of Slovenia, as the body, take standalone decision that can penalize me up to 5 million euro for negligence in AML turf or whatever turf. That's personal bankruptcy. I don't know that much, right? You don't.
We know what you're talking
about.
Yes.
We have the same.
You are bankers.
We have the same, but
you are bankers. You understand. The people that are not bankers
sure.
and not ECB regulated and don't have to look at the sanctioning list of US and UK and Europe and the rest, right? And shake hands every day. Did I do everything in look-through terms that in my cost of operation, it's done exactly the same as in my V&E's operation every single minute of the day? I'm just making a plastic example here because this is how it works, right? So liability context of banks these days is extremely harsh, right? And people just see, banks as, of course, evil and, persona non grata. But come on, we are living in a bank-centric economy. Our businesses in Europe, Central Europe,
with a huge responsibility and backbone of economy,
are not financing their investments predominantly in capital markets, and as in Anglo-Saxon world, they are predominantly financing their operations, obviously, with bank loans. And this is our turf. We are actually defining the development of the economy and the direction of development of the economy with our decisions. That's an enormous responsibility, right? And people simply underestimate this. Now, actually, we feel confident enough because we will return the entire state aid that we've got, right? I feel confident enough again to start explaining to people what banking is all about. And then if they, keep being somehow aggressive, I suggest them, please come to the Banking Museum of Slovenia, which we established a couple of years ago. I will show you just one document, a map on the wall, which is actually a Sparkasse map from that point of time, from 20s, which has red dots on it. It's a map of Ljubljana with red dots. All these red dots represent mortgages of, Municipal Savings Bank of Ljubljana at that point of time. Half of the city was built with the bank's money. Half of the city.
By the way, indeed recommendable to visit the place. I've been there. Yeah.
It is just an amazing demonstration of what bank-centric means. Without banks' money, this might be happening 20, 30 years later. Or not at all, right? And this is our role. And we, as bankers, have not been able yet to resume to what we used to be, respected members of society, right? Because there is another document in this museum, which is, one sheet of paper in this secession teller.
Yes.
That just, if you read this, highly esteemed savings bank is, approving the loan. I am kindly asking this highly esteemed savings bank to approve me the loan. Now these days, whatever you do,
The sales is different.
Too expensive loan. You don't pay me enough for deposit.
True.
Continuously, right? So it's a different paradigm.
Thank you, Blaž. Really interesting insights. And maybe we'll come to that a bit later. But speaking of development, and Daniel mentioned already, reading my thoughts, strategy. I know that rather recently you published a very ambitious 2030 strategy. Could you share for us and the audience what are the main pillars and the priorities for the next 5 years for the group?
Yeah, it's the size. So we have realized that size matters. If you're a listed business, of course, liquidity of the stock, daily liquidity of the stock matters. If you want to broaden your investor base and by that reach and access to capital once you need it, once you issue your bonds, right? If you at any point in time issue capital instruments, you need as broad reach as possible. And liquidity is one of the predominant determinators whether there's going to be interest or not, right? So in this respect, we are working on size. Our belief is that 50 billion euro is a minimum critical mass you need to reach as soon as possible as a standalone business, right? As a listed standalone business in the extremely draconianly regulated European space. It's simply otherwise very difficult to afford the entire setup you need to have, right, to be able to address all of these expectations from various banking union triangle expectations and the other aspirations. So size matters. That's why we said, let's apply a real ambition, which means we doubled the balance sheet in these 5 years, right? 6 years. And by that reach this 50 billion. Right? So it's pretty simple. We assess 50 billion is critical mass. Let's reach critical mass, right? And then we operate and communicate the entire strategy with 3 numbers, 50 to 1. 50 means size, balance sheet. 2 means revenue. 1 means profits, a billion, right? It doesn't ring a lot of bells in international big terms, but in Slovenia, this would be, of course, a lot, right? So we have been now with 500 million, the most profitable Slovenian company in terms of absolute profits, right? 1 billion would be even doubling this, right? So it would be material. And in the region in Southeastern Europe, you would maybe find three businesses of this level of profitability, right? In absolute terms. So it's size. But then, of course, it is how you get to the profitability element of it, because return on assets and return on equity you create from economics, not from the size, right? So you have to apply your capital in a meaningful way in order to be able to make 50 to 1 is a very simple equation, 2% or return on assets. How do you reach 2% return on assets in a declining rate environment, right? So you have to be smart in how you position your balance sheet, right? More consumer lending, more fixed rates, more leasing, less very lowly priced corporate business and so on, right? So you have to start managing, fee business, ancillary space. I mean, we corporate bankers are used to this, ex ante, ex post calculations, and we try to persuade credit committee. We will make sure 30% of payments are there, and then we shake, are they going to be there or not? We know this very well, right? But how to secure profitability is going to be the challenge, because of course we operate with the assumption that 2% lending rate of ECB really is going to be the lending rate, not that there is going to be 150 bips or 100 bips or something even more, right? Even worse for our economics. And then from this growth and positioning of balance sheet, we believe we can get there, right? It is based on significant efficiency improvements, which means that our aspiration, and we have clearly publicly communicated it, so it's no secret, I can tell it publicly, we want to originate more than 80% of all new standardized mass business through mobile app, self-serviced. So already now you can in Slovenia, in other markets to follow, get a cash loan up to 40K, right? Out of 40,000 euro, the credit card limits, overdrafts, and basic deposit products, insurance, and so on, right? Self-serviced. You don't need to talk to anyone in the bank. It's 24/7. You sign digital by a biometric signature. Email contract is emailed to you, and that's it, right? And then you, of course, want to apply the digital sales capacity that you teach people that they can, of course, self-servicely, in self-service format, actually do 90% of their banking needs, right? And then you want to keep in the branches only advisory stuff, in a sense that, you might not even manage cash anymore in the branches at all. I mean, it's a common discussion, right? By all the banks. And you might just have selected branches that still offer cash, higher amounts, the rest is ATMs. You anyhow work on transitioning from cash, right, to electronic ways of payments and so on. And then if you are able to do that, imagine you do 80% of retail business end-to-end, mobile first, digitally. We support that with 24/7 video chat, with closing capacity, which means our contact center clerks can close on spot any transaction. They're just housing loan with mortgage as collateral, right? that you can't close on spot. Of course, time to yes is possible, but you can't close transaction, right? You can't provide money. Cash loan up to 40,000 is provided at 2:00 at night, flawlessly, seamlessly through mobile app. If you struggle, through the contact center. If you don't qualify it in terms of creditworthiness, then you are directed to the branch still, right? But this means that you would then, of course, shrink your more or less fleet, right? Which is anyhow a challenge. We all know how big problem a talent shortage is. So, to get more people to work in branches is already a challenge, right? Let alone in other stuff. So it's going to be efficiencies, it's going to be size. I hope it was clear.
If totally clear. Just from your point of view, you're operating in countries where we also operate a lot of Western European subsidiaries, also, I don't know, OTP now, strongly there. What's the competitive edge where you say that's the USP, NLB, this is why somebody banks with you?
First is a set homework, which means, mobile first client experience is really polished. When it comes to corporates and when it comes to sentiment, how you're perceived, it is also you being a home play. So we are a home play. When I come to Skopje to talk to the governor, she speaks to me in Macedonian language. I understand her. When I come to Belgrade, I speak Serbian accent. When I go to Zagreb, I speak Croatian accent. So it's different. When for example, we didn't yet buy Komercijalna, but we were sponsoring because we had aspirations to buy something. We sponsored, for example, the Manager Association event where they award the Manager of the Year in Serbia. And I went up to the stage, and then I saw a big whole in anticipation. What is now this guy going to tell us? NLB, who cares about NLB 2% market share? And I said, I'm absolutely sure you're all asking yourself what I will not tell you. But the Slovenian in Serbia. And I said, look, if nothing else, guys, we watched the same movies, we read the same comics, and we cheered for the same flag. They had tears in their eyes. And that's the difference. No international CEO, if not from the region, can do that. Simply can't. We were once the same country. We were cheering for the same team. We were crying, right, for the same team. Crying when we were singing the same anthem. This is unbeatable. And Slovenia is the only of all of the nations of former Yugoslavia that was never aggressor to anyone else.
That's very much true, and this is also perceived like this. That I can confirm from
so you're neutrally
people from
accepted.
Other countries, exactly.
Yeah, you're neutrally accepted. You were never a conqueror.
Which, surprisingly or not, plays a role in developing the banking business,
Absolutely.
Developing the group.
Any business, sentiment matters.
Indeed. I'm just silent because you make me think. And I will return back to what you said before about digital in retail, which is kind of logical. But what else in terms of digital positioning of NLB could you share with us? Do you have cooperations with fintechs, or how much do you innovate internally?
Yeah, all of this is happening in parallel, right? You have a mobile app or you cooperate with fintech. Then you decide at a certain point of time, you might try proprietary something of this, Then you go, of course, with CRM solution. Of course, you partner with some fintech again, and so on and so on. So it's always a combination of everything. Whatever you implement, it's always a combination. You try to partner with external resources, and you, of course, where you want to differentiate from others, because all of these solutions are, sooner or later, a commodity, right? Everyone can use the same off-the-shelf product. So this differentiation part, you want to have in-sourced, right? So we are, as we speak, one of the largest ICT companies in the region. We have 700 people in IT, right? Which is not maybe impressing you, but in former Yugoslav territory, there are not many companies that have more than 700 people working in IT, right? We have started establishing the subsidiary in Belgrade because Serbia, with the project of Digital Serbia 15 years ago, really started introducing coding and informatics, ICT into the curriculum of elementary schools, and they're really producing thousands of programmers every year, right? It's easier to get them. So we have established a subsidiary in Serbia called NLB Digit, which now has 120, was just granted further FTE. So mid of next year, we will have 200 talents, right? And these guys will be working on platformization of whatever is procured, be it from external partners or proprietary developed. They will be scaling it group wide, right? It's tedious. We are incumbent bank. We have 300 systems. You know that very well. Being a big incumbent bank as well. It's not a walk in the park. It is a very tedious process. It's very hard. But if you have a clear vision, this is the aspired outcome. All of this end-to-end, mobile first, 24/7, easy but safe, right? This is how we communicate now. Mobile first, 24/7, easy but safe, because cybersecurity and fraud, becomes an overwhelming threat. The utmost expressed risk category is now cyber. This can throw you out of the business. I mean, you lose a big corporate ticket, okay, it's a hit to your profits. You have a major cyber incident, you're out of business. Right? So this is something that I am specifically being responsible for CISO functionalities in AML. And AML is another concern, because this is strong regulatory pressure and sanctioning context that is very, very strong, right? So these are the major concerns that keep me awake, right, at night.
You still are responsible for a bank that was state-owned. We talk now about innovation. How do you make sure that also the teams everywhere, you said now a new entity in Serbia, but the rest of your staff gets into innovation mode? Is there a special purpose you do there? Any special teams created? How is that working?
Yeah, we are of course now working on tribes and agility and all of these concepts. But interestingly, subsidiaries didn't feel that much this, state ownership. They were actually much more entrepreneurial, and we were actually blocking them because of our capital constraints and problems that we've got in Slovenia. But they were very, very entrepreneurial. Our Skopje team was always very entrepreneurial, and very, very promoting new features immediately when they came to life in Germany or whatever, or Poland, the well-developed Turkey, very close. So actually, it was more holding them back. We were in the straitjacket of state aid, so we couldn't really invest a lot, and we had to start repaying state aid. I think now that beyond Komercijalna was a trigger. Acquisition of Komercijalna Banka was a real trigger. You can do big things. We can. For 4 years, OTP was winning, for example, awards for best mobile apps. Now we are back. So the best mobile app is NLB. The best web app is NLB. The best web portal is NLB. Slovenia, talking about, right? And now we want to platformize that. Right? Where we all have room for improvement is, of course, the entire ecosystems. The digital sales, how to actually persuade people and train people that they can really use all of these sexy features in self-service format, and they don't come to branch or they don't call, right? They simply do it on their own, right? This is now a journey. But we put in production, for example, the first credit card self-approval, overdraft self-approval, and we plan 25% in a year. Guess what? It's 70% after 4 months. So transition is enormously quick. People are actually eager. People are actually eager of, not having to come anywhere or not having to pick up the phone and talk to anyone. Especially younger generations, they want to, do it on spot. They don't need anyone for that, right? As long as it's intuitive enough, it's your job to make it intuitive enough and easy to use enough. And then they will use it. And quicker than you believe. And this is then, of course, naturally something that is not that easy to embrace, in our communication, also to our managers and so on. Guys, 30% less people in a couple of years. No, impossible. I need 15 more FTEs to be able to address it. No, you will not get these 15 FTEs. Think of AI, RPA assistants, how to actually address the work process that you use already now differently and not with a person. Because you will not be able to find these 15 people even if you wanted to. They are not in the market, right? Demographics speak for themselves in Central Europe, right? Slovenia and Austria were the only countries in Central Europe that had actually growth of population, but this has come to a peak, right? We were actually, benefiting from Western Balkans influx, but then Germany opened the floodgate, and they went to Germany directly. So we lost this edge. Now it's people from Asia and Africa, and how do you use them in banking? Indians maybe yes in programming, but the others is much more difficult.
Switching gears to another topic, which is also on the radar screen since years, ESG. And what I'm curious about is how do you incorporate the ESG principles into the core business strategy? And is it the perception within the group equal, doesn't matter if it's Slovenia or Belgrade or Pristina, in terms of, understanding and embracing sustainability?
It is in the hearts of my employees. It is not necessarily in the societies. No, because we organized events, for example, a couple of years ago.
Thank you for understanding exactly what I mean with the question. Yeah, thank you.
We went to organize an event. I come to the stage and I have David Attenborough speech. They're looking at me if I'm nuts. Local society hotshots. What the hell are you talking about? Then I go on stage last year in Serbian event. I'm talking about my prostate cancer and my prostatectomy and so on. They look at, who is this alien? I said, guys, speak up. Guys, think of you, think of people, think of how we feel, how we function as a society, right? As I continuously provoke, are we speaking about equal opportunities? Are we speaking about diversity enough or not enough? In some of these societies, it's a non-topic. It has been non-topic. And then actually one of the clients called me. He just came to take my business card. He called me next day. Look, I also got a problem with prostate. No one speaks about this in this society. These are these small details. And then I organized him a meeting with my urologist, and he was totally satisfied with the experience, right? These are the details that in certain societies have totally different quality. There are things that are not spoken about at all, right? And then if you were talking about DEI and the whole context of, it's by no means only E. Of course, the problem is E. Polluted air in Balkans is disaster, right?
Yes.
And banks and societies have to, find any opportunity to work on energy efficiency, on central heating systems, on renewable production. Of course, this is our duty, and we all try to figure out, how can we actually sponsor more projects? Because the problem is always are there projects? What can be financed, right? Are they ready? Are they, embedded into the environment properly? Are they, actually financeable or bankable at all, right? So we are missing projects. But the more we talk about it, the more we help local societies, the more we prepare them, the more it's moving. So E is one part of the story. But, S and G is a horror story. Here the problem lies. Above all, G, who is running our countries? Who is running our businesses? This is by far the biggest problem. Forget the E. Because if these guys were right, the E would be automatically done. We are preaching about Chinese didn't sign Paris Agreement. They will be there 20 years before Europe even knows. Because they do it. They don't talk about it. Right? They are able to build 30 nuclear power plants in 10 years. We did how many in 15 years? We shut them down. Right? So who's nuts? Right? Who is authentic?
Just looking at you, if any comments here.
No, on the Chinese topic.
No. I'm talking about, of course, calling things by the name. No, one thing is what is, of course, right. Yes, equal opportunity rights. Yes, freedoms, right. But at the end of the day, elements of competitiveness and hard work need to still be retained in the society. Because otherwise, in global context, you disappear. You simply disappear. We don't have enough children. We would work 30 hours a week, right? We have this right, this right, this right. You are not supposed to call me after 4. I have my right to have work-life balance. All fine. But there are guys on the other side of the planet working 16 hours a day. They don't switch off, they switch on. Right? Out of 44 key technologies, they mastered 37 by now. And we can what? Basing our free riding on NATO umbrella, doing what? Right? Yeah. Casual life. Every civilization has failed on, excessive hedonism. And that's all fine. We can all have only rights, but someone has to work. And then who is working? Who are we bringing in to work? We don't have our own children anymore, right? This is a dying society. With 1.2 to 1.5 children per household, it's a dying society. It's, of course, common destiny of all developed world. Look at South Koreans or Japanese or whatever. So, but, in this case, then you need to really invest in technologies to robotize, automate, whatever, to replace manpower. We have the technologies already. We have the money. It is who is taking the decision of which technologies to apply and where to invest. That's G. Right?
I would have an idea for a further podcast on that. But
Yeah,
Daniel, go ahead.
I have a lot of topics, but what I did not ask at the beginning, I think you started also with the talent in the region. Now it fits into, because you said dying population, less people there. How do you ensure, and we have the same issue, how do you ensure that the best people come to banking in our region and are not going either abroad anyhow to Western countries, or as well as going to other industries? You said before as well, that was much more sexier years ago to be banker. Now it's probably not. How do you attract them? You personally, I guess, pitching, because when I listen to you, that's something that resonates to a lot of people. But otherwise, going to university. So what's your plan here?
We are actually trying to emphasize and educate youngsters that we actually are indeed a very sexy industry, because we are actually IT. They don't necessarily see us this way, right? But we have been fintech since the ATMs, which exist from mid-60s. So they are 60 years old, right? And in this respect, banks have always been technological companies. It's just that the user experience, was neglected. right? And then a couple of youngsters came in with revolutionary, disruptive ideas. 2 products. Open an account in a couple of minutes and offer a sexy card. This is how they started. 2 products, but sexy metal card, whatever. It was very simple value proposition. It was nothing special. It was you open an account quickly and cheaply, and you get the card quickly and cheaply. What revolution is this in terms of product offering? Nothing. It was highly convenient and online, And then of course there was no level playing field in the first years because we couldn't do it. In Slovenia, for example, we only now for 4 years, I think, can video authenticate a person. So making one of the neos, of this world, fintech banks, whatever. Now they are banks. At that point in time, they were not even the banks. They could do the video authentication from Germany of my neighbor in Ljubljana. I was not allowed to do the video authentication of my neighbor in Ljubljana because my local legislation prevented it. You can't do it. He has to come to the branch and physically authenticate himself or herself. But come on, that's not a level playing field, right? Even if I, improve the process, I offer the service, I have a feature in my mobile app, right? I'm not allowed to do it, right? So there was a level playing field I mentioned on one side. On the other side, these guys really pushed us into finally doing the homework and understanding the importance of the client experience. They're not offering anything. Maybe cryptos is something that we don't offer, but the rest is classical lending. The rest is classical payments. The rest is, cards, accounts. It's our home turf. It is this our, core value proposition that we just didn't pay enough attention, in sense of what technology now offers that you can, somehow proceed to the client, that client enjoys using your service.
Which at the end will make the difference towards any competitor.
That's it. At the end, it's going to be ease of use, safety of use as well, because this is becoming more and more dominant, because now we have started already impairing certain features that were appeared as, easy to use. But for example, in such a, accelerated fraud environment, right? We, for example, now require for payment exceeding 15,000 euro, it can't be done through the mobile app, sorry. You have to call the contact center, or contact center will call you. You can trigger the payment, but it's not going to be executed. Because we've seen, 100,000 euro being swept from the account easily. People not being careful, providing their credentials, username and password to crooks pretending being NLB. Gen AI-driven calls already these days are totally authentic. You can't differentiate, right? And people simply, they come to branch and insist that you physically pay with payment order. People are so naive. We have now use cases, we just discussed it yesterday, a supervisory board, an incident, a use case where the client comes to the branch insisting to pay from a fraud scheme, obvious fraud scheme. You say, no, we won't. This is a fraud. No, I insist. Signing 3 statements, I insist you pay. People are so naive, right? So the ease of use is at the same time big threat, right? And this, you have to find the balance. Ease to use and then impair it a bit, because otherwise it's uncontrollable. And consumer protection in the society of rights in Europe is going in the direction that the banks will have to indemnify almost everything. We see now, for example, cases in Swiss franc lending, right? Where Slovenia,
don't tell us.
You know this even better.
Yes.
But in relative terms, we have also pain potentially. Ruling back, annulling 20-year-old contract, right? And judging about the explanatory duty from today's perspective. Come on, guys. The guy came in, signed a specific annex that was read to him by notary, and you say, and the court doesn't even look into the substance anymore. Upfront rules, in favor of the borrower, right? And this is, of course, in other countries even much worse, and you had this experience as well. So, but this is, eating into reputation of the sector, eating into, some other elements of it. Now, that's why actually we are suffering. But we now have to show to people, young people, that we can nevertheless still be sexy, because we are IT business. We have always been IT business. Let's just make sure that our apps look, appealing, that our user experience is really seamless. We really need to put the user experience to the forefront and then start embedding everything else, because we are the utility. We have the account. Social media know everything about you, what you like, but we know where did you withdraw money, when did you withdraw money. Very likely we know why, because, next door there is a restaurant. If you pay by card, we know everything about you. Where you travel every year, everything we know about you.
So it means to use it smart for the purpose of the people.
Be relevant.
Yeah.
Relevant, be the meaning for me. And that's, my colleagues, the CRM, analytical, operational. Cut the crap. It's about being relevant. It's about being at the right time, at the right place with the right solution. That's CRM. Nothing else.
Thank you for bringing it so much to the point. To two of us using the CRM.
Heavy CRM users.
Exactly. Can I take you off-road? And I would reveal to our audience something which maybe you guys don't know. So the family Brodnjak is since decades engaged in winery and viticulture. How is your managerial and financial background playing a role into it?
It started earlier than financials. That's why it's embedded, because I was actually pruning vines at the age of 12. And you know that the vineyard master doesn't trust someone to prune vines unless, there is real trust. So I was doing this with the age of 12. My grandfather was one of the biggest smugglers with wine in the region there, selling, buying the wine from the grape producers and then selling to big restaurants and so on. My grandfather was actually a sales manager of the company that was managing all restaurants in my hometown. In socialism, of course, there was one company managing all restaurants.
So sales skills are...
Exactly. And now I know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Now we know.
He was a sales director. Yeah. And, in this respect, sales wine, right? And then he planted actually 5,000 vines when I was born in 1974. So it is in the genes. It is in the veins of my family. And now I'm specifically proud because we are able to put together 3 generations. My father is a career manager. I mean, he was a manager as well of a big retailer. But then he retired, and for a couple of years he couldn't find, what is my next occupation. Last year, 24 vintage, with the age of 74, he did 90% of tractor works in 14-hectare vineyard. Him being 74. My daughter was studying in Krems. And she did a practice in Weingutstadt Krems, one of the oldest cellars in Austria. And she was, drilling, and now she's the winemaker. And my brother is actually the carrier of the whole thing. So it's 3-generational project. I am there as more or less spiritus agens and financial support and weekends. And I don't enjoy anything more, of course, besides striking a good banking deal. When I'm there over the weekend and there is a group of people coming, and then I personally run the tasting. And that's what fills me with the energy, like for 2 weeks.
Beautiful, thank you.
And still, we also need to reveal you're doing a lot in sports. So when is the time remaining for that one? So you did your own sports a lot when you were a little bit younger, probably. But now you're also engaging in basketball, handball. You have been associations. When is the time for that?
Well, that's hobby. Now there is still some time for hobbies. In terms of institutional, right, engagement is not that strong. So I'm more a face. NLB being a strong sponsor, the largest sponsor of sports in the country. Slovenia is a very sportive nation, right? We are a very sportive nation. At the same time, actually, in 2017, we were European champions in basketball, second in volleyball, and third in the world in handball. A 2 million nation in the same year. That's unbelievable, right? You have the best cyclists, 2 best cyclists, right? Like in the world, you have, Doncic of this world and so on. So pretty successful nation generally. And sports is embedded in what we do, in everything what we do, right? You will see Slovenians running, cycling, you simply visit, the landscape of Slovenia and you will see people on the bikes and running, right? It's simply so important to us. And it's somehow also demonstrating this Olympic ambition. And it's the best ambassador of Slovenia. Being so successful, this is automatically being the best ambassador of the country, right? And that's why we are investing that much in sport. I'm a great lover. I watch everything from whatever.
So you don't have any favorite sports, or do have?
I was training table tennis. I was the third in Slovenia as a young cadet in table tennis. My son is now runner-up, was in the cadet category and so on. So we do some, but generally we are big, great fans. One of the best moments of my life is going with my son to Cardiff to finals of Champions League. And we went by car from Ljubljana to Vienna airport, then flying to London, then taking a Stansted Express, then taking a tube, then taking a train, missing the one, and then finally being on the place in stadium. He was 6 at, 15 minutes before the match starts.
Oh, that was close.
This was journey, right? But this was father and son visiting European Champions League final.
Resonates a lot.
With 6 means of transport in a single day. We started at 5 o'clock in the morning. We were on stadium at 8:45. GMT, watch the match, and then these are unique things, and this sports gives you, right? It gives you pain, but it gives you an enormous celebration as well, and it profiles you. That's why I'm so supportive that my son is doing sports, because in the virtual generations, right, a sound value system of the, understanding and embracing that life consists of defeats, not only likes, because there is really a self-corrupted picture of myself, right? If I only get 500 likes a day for the most ridiculous post, right, on whatever social media you use, or 15 of that they use, right? They have to learn the hard way that life consists of defeats, of heavy falls, of injuries, right? After which you have to return, be the rehab, be training more, being up 1-0, 2-1, and it's 9-5 in the fifth set of the championship finals of the national championship of Slovenia, which was my son's situation. He was playing the single finals. He won the finals in doubles and mixed doubles, but he was playing single finals. He was 1-0 up sets, 2-1 up, and he had 9-5 in the fifth, and he lost. But this did much, much more for his value system and his approach to life than if he won that one. Life consists of heavy defeats, and this you have to understand, embrace, wake up, stand up, and fight more.
I could have tons of more questions.
Same here. And I'm memorizing what you said. And I would have asked, what would you else advise young talents if they decide to jump on the financial industry trend? But I think your last sentence is so memorable, that life consists of defeats, not of likes. And this shapes you. Can I summarize like
absolutely.
this?
You celebrate success, but you embrace defeats and come back stronger.
Thank you. In the name of Daniel and me, for this super intensive, fascinating interview, I personally, I think Daniel as well, felt your passion, and you wear the heart not only on the jacket, but in everything you do. We sense this, and now I know what's the secret of success and of the growth of the group, NLB. So congratulations. Thank you for being with us today. And to our audience, hope you tune in for the next podcast, Banking on Success. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.